I can make the blur on your wiener this big, or I can make it this big. The choice is up to you.
Spanning the globe from the four corners of the world, traveling the earth while entertaining millions in secrecy. These are lessons learned through not so average experiences from a life spent creating reality television. This is accidental education. Reality Lab with your guide, Dr. Tom Cunningham, Esquire, amateur DDS.
Welcome to Accidental Education Reality Lab. I am Tom Cunningham, your host. And I teased a little bit in the beginning about making somebody's wiener this big or this big by the blur. I directed a dating reality show called Dating Naked for VH1 back in the day. And of course, we used to blur all the contestants. And whenever I would have a male contestant who didn't seem like he was attracted to who he was going out on a date with or refused to interact with them, I'd pull him aside and say, look, man, you need to act like you're enjoying this date. You need to participate a little bit more. We need a little bit more out of you. I just can't have you show up like a bump on the log, and sit there and act like you just hate it. So there's a couple things we can do. Either you can continue with the behavior that you're exhibiting right now, and when we get into post-production, you know I'm gonna have to blur your wiener, right? Well, I can either make the blur this big, or I can make it this big. The choice is up to you. And the point of that being is, it was a bluff on my part because I wasn't in post-production. That was the showrunner, and that was the executives who decided, the blurs for everyone's genitalia. But for me, it was just a little bit of leverage. It was my way of trying to get somebody to play ball with what we were doing. And for the most part, it did work. Sometimes people just need a little coaxing, but other times you need a little bit of leverage. And we live in a leverage world. Everybody is looking for leverage on somebody else. We see it in politics all the time. Hell, Jeffrey Epstein made a career out of leverage. Politicians are masters at leverage. Donald Trump, when he was in real estate, was a master at leverage. We saw, I don't know if you've read the book, The Art of the Deal, but he talks about getting the air rights for Trump Tower and the battle he was in with Tiffany, and he was going to build this ugly monstrosity of a building that they would have to stare at every day. It's all leverage, whether it's perceived, well, it's all perception, and it's the perception of leverage. And we see that the way with Donald Trump and dealing with leaders of foreign countries. You see it in business. And the world of sports is no different. And in the world of sports reporting is no different either. It's all about leverage. And in the case of sports reporting, it's all about access. We've gotten away, our culture has gotten away from any kind of objectivity when it comes to the people that so-called journalists are reporting on. We saw that, it started to rear its ugly head during the Obama administration, when you had journalists who became advocates for the Obama presidency. That's when we really saw presidents in their cabinet and the people associated in Obama's orbit inviting in journalists. And they did it under the guise of, oh, you're getting unfettered access to see what we do. When you're given unfettered access, you have a tendency to feel like you're a part of that inner sanctum. And you don't want to leave that inner sanctum because you like the adulation, you like the invites, you like all the trimmings and goodies that go along with it. And you don't want to give that up. And why would you want to give that up? All you have to do is get on TV and push a certain angle. It's not necessarily a lie because you saw it, you witnessed it. You know what they're trying to do, and you know the road that they're trying to go down. So in your mind, it's not really a lie. It's what you saw. But what you're not seeing with the journalist is questioning that road that is being pushed and that the administration or the business wants to go down. That's where journalism has lost its way. And in recent days, especially this week, we've had a ton of stories come in that we've had zero transparency, like in the Kyle Shanahan story, which they waited 11 days after the wreck. I'm not even sure if there was a car wreck. That whole story is just has cover-up written all over it. And from the journalists who cover the 49ers, again, it's about access. If you write something negative about the 49ers, you're going to be denied access. We saw this with the Indiana Fever. What was it, last year? A beat reporter for the Fever, which I can't see as being like one of the highest rungs on the sports journalism ladder, but you know, it's Indiana, you're covering the Fever. You're covering, Caitlin Clark's team. And I can't remember the question that he asked, but his credentials were pulled because he was asking a normal question that a sports reporter would ask. So that's a danger that we are seeing now in this day and age of access journalism. It's, if you do ask the tough question, your access is going to be pulled and your press credentials might be pulled as well, just going into the press room to cover the team that you're paid to be there to write stories about or get on camera about. That's a really, really dangerous road to go down for the obvious reasons, because the press supposedly was established to keep power in check. So once, like everything else, once power decides, all right, we've got our own PR arm over here, let's invite them to be with us. So once they get into our orbit, they're not going to say anything negative about us. And that's where we are today. You very seldom see sports journalists challenging any kind of sports team that they're assigned to cover. You kind of see it a little bit if a journalist or a pundit or a podcaster, mainly in the podcast world, and it's hard to say. Podcasting is different than journalism. So basically what you're saying is your opinion, and everybody, of course, everybody has an opinion, but most of the opinions on podcasts are formed through what they read and for what sound bites that they get. It's different when you go into a facility day after day after day, well, whether it's the 49ers, the Miami Dolphins, the Jaguars, the Pistons, whoever it is. Your perception of reality is different unless you're in that environment. And from where I sit, I feel like if I'm going into the Pistons press room every day, day after day, I'm friendly with the staff there, everybody knows me, it's very unlikely for me to write something that's in a negative light about the organization, unless the organization agrees. Sorry, that's my wife. I forgot to silence my phone. Unless the organization agrees with the narrative that's being put out there. And case in point, this whole accident, or whatever it is, with Kyle Shanahan, the one that took 11 days for it to start to be reported on. And the NFL insider, Adam Schefter, releasing his tweet or his post on X 1 minute after the press conference started with the 49ers. You know, being an insider is just I believe, just a PR person. It's a glorified PR person masquerading as a journalist. And, you know, I printed up this article, and I want to read part of it. It's from TMZ. And you can think what you want to about TMZ. I have my own personal opinions about TMZ. I happen to think that TMZ, a main financier of them, comes from the intel community, because we're talking about a news organization that somehow has all these contacts all over the world and is able to shape narratives and push them out there. Is TMZ as powerful as they once were? I think that's waning a little bit. I think that this Nancy Guthrie situation with the kidnapping of her mom has kind of sullied them a little bit, especially Harvey, when it comes to, you know, it just, that whole thing seemed weird when the ransom note was going to Harvey. So, and that's a little off. And then when the Epstein files came out, there were references to Harvey about, you know, catching and killing stories or creating a good narrative for Prince Andrew, and kind of doing negative stories about Virginia Giuffre. I don't know, Giuffre. And by the way, Virginia didn't kill herself. So anyways, so yes, TMZ, but at times TMZ, you know, TMZ gets, they start digging into things. And once they start digging, if you have something to hide, and if you're not within their web of people that they're trying to protect, then you're in danger of being found out. And this just might be a plant story to make it look like TMZ is doing their due diligence, but I thought it was interesting. As somebody who's worked on law enforcement shows for half of my career and have had a lot of exposure to agencies all over the country, you know, both local and state, a little bit of federal law enforcement, I know you want to talk about. So anyways, I digress. Here's part of the TMZ article. TMZ submitted a public records request with the Palo Alto Police Department, which told us the video as well as the accident report are exempt from disclosure. Okay, let's just stop right there. So how are body cam footage and an accident report exempt from disclosure when you're dealing with a private citizen on a public road? I don't understand that. So, and it doesn't go on to explain how that exemption takes place. But let's just look at what's happening to Tony Romo. And this is a good example of organizations that have the power to let things out into the public, and other ones that have the power to censor what goes out into the public. And I would say at this point, the 49ers organization has a tremendous amount of power of censorship to control the narrative that they want to put out there. On the other hand, with Tony Romo getting his, you know, driving under the influence, we see the video. I mean, we see the body cam footage, and it's rough to watch, man, because I think all of us have been in that situation where we've, you know, had a bit too much to drink and have driven, and some people have been caught, others have not been caught. But, you know, back when I was drinking, I'd always, you know, it didn't happen that much because the cell phone camera wasn't around. But the times that somebody had like a VHS camera or a Hi8 camera, it would take videos of us all drinking, and we'd watch the tapes later. I'd always feel a bit humiliated when I saw it, because I knew that wasn't me, and in the way that I was acting, in the way that I was talking, it was just really, really embarrassing. And I can only imagine what Tony's going through in seeing himself in that condition. And don't get me wrong, I'm not some prude or whatever when it comes to drinking, but for myself, you know, there just came a point in my life where I felt like I was full. and I'd had enough, and that was it, and just decided not to drink anymore. And maybe Tony will come to that same conclusion, but some reason, well, and I know every state's different. So in Wisconsin, I guess the body cam footage isn't exempt from disclosure. So, and also too, I think if Tony Romo, there's been a lot said about Tony Romo and his contract that he signed at CBS and how much money he's making, and people being critical of his calling of games or his color commentary during the game, saying that he's lost his fastball and he's just not as good as he used to do or once was. And also there's been criticism that he's not putting in the effort into broadcasting that he should to get better. And that's kind of the same criticism that we saw with his career in football, where he's got natural talent, natural ability, but didn't put in the effort to make himself better. And we're kind of, we're hearing rumblings of that when it comes to broadcasting. So CBS, I'm sure, was just like, all right, this is a good out for us. I know that they've suspended him or whatever, but pretty much you don't, when a broadcast company decides that they're going to suspend you, that usually means that you're out. And I don't see Tony Romo returning back for the next season of football. But getting back to Kyle Shanahan, and that's, and I'm sure if Tony Romo was their number one guy and he was very highly thought of, this would be a different story. CBS would be doing a lot more in the PR department to help him along. But now this is just, it's a humiliation ritual for Tony. And CBS is just sort of standing by going, oh boy, Tony, this is bad. Our hands are tied. I don't know what to do. We got to say goodbye. We have to part ways. You stretching and limbering up and trying to walk the straight line. It doesn't look good. It reflects poorly on us. Gives him a convenient out. I get that. It's business. But it's too bad that it has to be, as humiliating as that, just from a personal level. I know it's kind of funny to watch people in embarrassing situations, but embarrassment is one thing, humiliation is really another thing. All right, so getting back to Kyle, and this story, again, is so weird. A spokesperson for PAPD confirmed to TMZ nothing will be released related to the accident. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's sealed? Are we never ever going to see anything? We don't even know if there was an accident. There are no pictures from the scene. There's no pictures of the vehicle, of Kyle's vehicle. There's no pictures of the vehicle that he supposedly struck. There's nothing. There's not even, I don't think there's even, I think there's been like one or two accident reports, but I'm not even sure how official those are that have been released. As you know, the 49ers head coach took the blame for his July 14th wreck after a clerical error in the state database said the other driver was at fault. This is one of my favorite parts of the story. And this is the one that the whole PR department is clinging on to. They're saying that Kyle has taken the blame. Fine, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened for the accident. But this whole idea of this clerical error, that seems a bit strange to me. Because originally it had come out that he wasn't at fault, that the other driver was at fault. But now he's like, no, I am the one. I am the one to blame for all of this. It's like he's throwing himself on the sword for some reason, which is odd because we don't know the condition of the person, if there was another person in the vehicle that was involved in the accident, and his relationship to that person, if at all there was a relationship, a prior relationship. And I'm not talking about lover or anything else. I'm just, was it the barista that, would wait on him when he'd go get a coffee? I don't know. None of us know. But to hang your hat on that part, which, is true to form in all these PR nightmare cases that go on. It's always, well, I accept full responsibility for my actions. in this way of like publicly absolving yourself from what you've done, which fine, I understand that if it really truly is your fault and you're accepting blame for it. But a lot of times there's no consequences for it. And I feel like in this situation that he's come out, they kept it a secret for a while. He's come out and said, no, it's my fault. There was a clerical error, citing this other person, if they existed or if they didn't exist. And I'm accepting all the blame for this. And now that that's done, time to move on. Okay, who wants to ask a question about football? That's the key right there. That's the narrative. That's the idea of, do you want your blur to be here or do you want it to be here? That's the 49ers way of saying, do you want access to the upcoming football season or you do not want access? Because Kyle has summed up what had happened. He said he was at fault, something he was looking down at his cell phone, which I find that hard to believe, because with the kind of contract that Kyle is making, I can't see him picking up the cell phone to use it. And somebody in his age range is definitely not going to have a problem connecting Bluetooth to his vehicle. So that part of it, I'm not buying. You can't use technology as an excuse for somebody in Kyle's age range. That's just not happening. And then also too, and I go back to it, I've taken responsibility, let's move on. That's the way of the 49ers saying we're taking no more questions about this. Once Kyle has taken responsibility, then there are no more questions. That's it. Shut up. Whatever we tell you is what happened. Don't question it. And if you do question it, guess what? You're not going to be on the sidelines or in the press box for any game. How do you like that? That's the leverage. As you know, the 49ers head coach took blame. Oh, I read that. On Tuesday, Kyle told reporters he was distracted behind the wheel, reaching to grab his phone after it fell between the seats. Okay. He was distracted because his phone fell between the seats. All right, I get that. I drive tons of rental cars during the course of a year. And I get that. I get into a car that I don't really know, and I put my phone somewhere, and if it doesn't have a specific spot for it, it has a tendency to slide around. I get that. But I also do know when I'm in my own car, there's a spot for my phone, and that's where it goes. Even if I am having a conversation with somebody and I get into my vehicle, my phone always goes in that spot. Even if I'm holding the phone, which I don't normally do because I usually have earbuds in when I'm talking to somebody, that just doesn't happen unless it's a rental car. And again, we're not sure if Kyle was driving a rental car or his own car. We're sort of led to believe that it's his own vehicle, even though that we don't have any pictures of it and probably will never have any pictures of it unless they decide to hop on, an AI source and create those pictures. So here, the story's becoming a little bit more tidy now. Kyle's driving along the road, cell phone slips. Oh man, where's my cell phone? Boom! Oh, accident. Oh, I'm all fucked up from the accident. I look like somebody has kicked my ass, and I'm not going to tell anybody about it for a couple of days. But I take responsibility for it. My fault. The person that I hit, totally not their fault, if there is that person. So let's move on. Okay, we get back to it. Oh yeah, long snapper. I got your question about that. All right. While his eyes off the road, he said he crossed onto oncoming traffic, driving straight towards an SUV. Okay, so we have an SUV that he hit. All right. But we just have SUV. We don't have the make or the driver information so far. Let's see. Chris. Who is Chris? Chris must be somebody from the 49ers organization. Chris claimed Kyle suffered a broken nose, ribs, hand, a huge gash across his face that required 40 stitches. These are pretty significant injuries not to have any kind of photos or accident report or body cam footage from. I mean, this almost sounds, this could have been a fatality. PAPD told us that even if Kyle requested or was okay with releasing body cam, the department would not release footage as he is not the only one captured in the video. Okay. In this era of transparency that we live in California leading the way with transparency and body cams, so now there's stipulations to it. So why is it that when we have body cam footage from San Francisco of somebody getting pushed onto the tracks, we see the passersby who are just, you know, walking in public? Sometimes they're pixelated, sometimes they're not. So even if that was a concern for the department of showing a possible victim, you could just blur that victim. But they decided not to blur that victim. There's a lot of unanswered questions here, and that's one of them. The delayed announcement from the team, Kyle choosing to speak about the incident with a small group of reporters not on camera. There you go. Not on camera with a small group of reporters. Hey fellas, come in here. How big or small do you want the blur to be? I can make it this big, or I can make it this big. That's exactly how that conversation went down. All right, guys, here's the story. This is the one that you're going to go with. And if you ask me or my staff or players any other questions relating to this, I'm not going to say that I'm going to pull your credentials, but you're a part of what we're doing. You know, we want a Super Bowl championship team here. You know, that's what I'm building toward. And I need you guys to help me out. So now everybody has a skin in the game. When you take the press and you have a closed door meeting with no cameras, are they really the press at this point? It sounds more like a staff meeting to me. All right. Let's see. Let's move around. Delayed the announcement. Orders. That's finally the end of the article. All have caused people to speculate and raise questions about the crash, which could not be answered with the body cam and report. And that's the way that they want it. During 2020, after George Floyd OD'd, the cry came out, body cams on all police officers. We need transparency. And I'm behind it. And I'm 100%, you know, with the people who wanted the body cams. But what we're seeing now is the reality of what actually goes on. And there's no narrative shaping at that point. When you have the footage, you can see exactly what goes down. It's when you don't have the footage is when you get narrative shaping. And that's what we're seeing with the Kyle Shanahan story. And it wouldn't surprise me if some point that the body cam footage and everything gets sealed, just like the Rob Reiner autopsy, which to me is another one of those that's going to go down. It's nobody's going to remember that happened, so I like to bring it up as much as possible, because for years there was rumors going around about Rob Reiner allegedly having something to do with the death of Heather O'Rourke, or allegedly molesting her. She was the girl from Poltergeist, and allegedly passing her around other directors in Hollywood. And then there were also the rumors that Carl Reiner, Rob's dad, allegedly molested Carl and would let his friends molest Carl. And other rumors have since surfaced about Carl, or Rob, molesting his son, the one who ended up killing him. I don't know if they're true, but the one thing that I do know is after the autopsy was done, it was sealed. And in my mind, the reason why it was sealed is because you're covering something up. And what would you be covering up? To me, you're covering up sexual mutilation. And to me, that's if they would have, if the coroner would have said, okay, here's the autopsy, as gruesome as it is, you know, we've got 57 wounds to the neck. Mrs. Reiner was partially decapitated, a couple of defensive wounds on the hands. Same thing with Carl. It looks like son Nick had pulled the mom's hair back and carved at her neck. It looks like the fatal wound was delivered to the dad, but then Nick took time slitting his throat. That, I mean, as horrific as that is for the family, it's cut and dry. But if there's information in there about cutting off a penis or molesting or mutilating a vagina, that's going to be a little bit different. And that to me would lead to something dark and evil going on within that family. But we're not here to discuss Rob Reiner and his untimely death. We're here to discuss how leverage and how it's being used, especially in the sports world now. And the Kyle Shanahan story is a great example of how this works, of how this is how it's done when you have a media that advocates for you instead of reports on what you're doing and is trying to seek out the truth. The media is no longer interested in the truth, and that's not just sports media, it's also the mainstream media. They don't want the truth. They want to push a narrative, and they want to be a part of that club. And as long as they feel like they're doing the bidding of the club that they want to be in, they'll be invited to certain peripheral things, but they'll never be in that inner sanctum. They're just going to be used, and when they're done being used, they're going to be tossed out. And once you get tossed out from that club, you really have nowhere to go. I mean, look at all these doofuses that we see who've been tossed, who are like peripheral scribes pushing out narratives that the inner sanctum wanted them to do. You know, your Jim Acostas of the world, your Katie Couric, your Keith Olbermanns, your Don Lemons. They don't have anything anymore. They were part of the group. The group got tired of them and kicked them out. And now they're just kind of, you know, wandering through the desert trying to figure out what they're doing. Still getting on, you know, a podcast trying to, you know, say, hey guys, I'm still here. I did this all for you. Can you let me back inside the clubhouse? You know, I'm getting awfully lonely. I'm feeling like, you know, I sacrificed my career for you, and this is the thanks I get. Well, you made your bed. All right. Speaking of another sports story that's being covered, you know, it's kind of it's tight-lipped right now because I understand there's an investigation going on. And that's Michael Lombardi at UNC. Michael Lombardi is the GM of football there. So it came to light earlier in the week. Let's start off with this. This is from ESPN. The start of Bill Belichick's second fall camp as North Carolina's head coach started much the same as the first, with questions about off-the-field chaos overwhelming any discussions on on-the-field product. The school announced Monday that Michael Lombardi, Belichick's right-hand man and highest-paid general manager in the public institute at any public institution in the country with a $1.5 million salary, has been placed on leave due to an investigation. Okay, I understand that. There's certain things with an investigation, you have allegations, right? And if you have enough allegations to warrant an investigation, then it's like, okay, whoever this person is that's being investigated, we have to pull them out of that. And we're in the prelim of an investigation. A lot of people get very frustrated the way investigations work because they don't work the way that they do on TV. Investigations take time. You have to interview witnesses. You have to corroborate stories. You have to look at emails, text messages. And I don't even know what these allegations are. Let's go on. 3 days later, UNC announced an official investigation and Lombardi's contact had begun while Belichick largely sidestepped questions about the impact on his team. We're working through We're working through some of these things, Belichick said during a news conference in which reporters were told he would not comment directly on Lombardi's status. We're in a particular time of the year right now. We're focused on certain things, and they are in play. The certain things that are now in play will happen later in the calendar year. So we're taking it day by day. All right. That's my Bill Belichick impersonation. The school released a statement before Belichick took to the lectern saying, as a result of the concerns behind the allegations that led to the personnel action regarding Michael Lombardi announced on July 27th, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, through its Office of University Counsel, is in the process of investigating this matter. All right. University policy suggests most investigations into human resource matters take about 30 days. All right, there's your timeline for the investigation. But athletic director Steve Newmark said there is no set timeline. All right. Though he added that he hopes it would be a quick process. Yeah, I mean, I would hope it would be a quick process. But again, you know, if somebody's being accused of something, and as much as, you know, I don't really care for Michael Lombardi, but I still feel like that, you know, Lombardi needs to go through the due process, even though he's kind of, you know, well, he's fudged his resume. He's not that nice of a guy. You know, he's like a carnival barker sort of snake oil salesman. If the truth be told, because he didn't have really anything, he had nothing to do with the success of the 49ers Super Bowl run in the 80s, which he claims he did in his book. He didn't have much success when he was at Cleveland, and he was really far removed. He wasn't even on staff the last time, the time that he talks about the Patriots winning a Super Bowl and him being a part of. So there's a lot of like Walter Mitty in his background. All right, Steve Newmark. From our perspective, and I think there's a recognition across the board that the University Counsel's Office is going to have this go as quickly as possible, Newmark said. But I think it's also important that they do it the right way and gather the information needed. Agreed, Steve. Yeah, don't rush through it, you know, unless it's overwhelming, there's no way out of it. And then, you know, if it's really that bad, just get it over with. Either fire the guy, just come right out and say, this is it. But if this is something that's concocted by somebody, some asshole at NC State, then yeah, take the time to do it. And again, as much as, you know, again, I don't personally dislike Lombardi. I just think he's a goof. But even a goof has a right to due process. Newmark declined to say the investigation included any other members of the athletic department. He also declined to address reports that the College Sports Commission is currently investigating UNC's football program. The CSC, a new body created in the wake of House settlement that polices name, image, and likeness payments, among other things. UNC Chancellor Lee Roberts, grandson of Hale Boggs, initially demurred from commenting on Lombardi's situation following regularly scheduled Board of Trustees meeting. But before wrapping a media session, Roberts offered his own commentary on the situation. Here we go. I'm disappointed that we're talking about this. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair statement. I would be disappointed too. You know, it's being somebody who oversees, you know, a group of people. When a mistake is made and I have to speak on the behalf of that person that made the mistake, yeah, it is disappointing. We should be focusing on our student athletes and their successes. Yes, I agree with that. But you can't ignore the elephant in the room. It's distressing to me and everyone else in the administration entrusted with leadership at this remarkable university that this is something that we're going to have to spend time on. Agreed. I have no problem with that statement. Seems like he's stating the obvious, but it has to be said. Belichick arrived at North Carolina December 2024 with lofty expectations, but his first season was mired on off-field drama. Really? Largely surrounding his girlfriend, Jordan Hudson. No, you don't say. Before imploding in a woeful 4-8 campaign on the field. And yeah, I was there for the TCU Carolina game. North Carolina's first drive, myself and everybody else in the stadium thought, all right, here we go. Here's a new era. And then it got worse. And then it got worse. And it got worse. And it got worse. And it got really, really bad. And by the end of the game, you could probably count the amount of people that were left in the stadium. That's how bad it got. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with this investigation. You know, again, Lombardi's a goof. Even a goof needs due process. And that's all I can really say about that. I don't know. None of us really know what these allegations are, or if they're even real or not real. And if they are real, hopefully they're dealt with swiftly and justly for everybody involved, because North Carolina is a great university and they have a great athletic department, and the hiring of Belichick is kind of a speed bump. It was kind of an ill-advised hiring that should not have taken place, but did. And the main person pushing it, John Pryor, who is on the board of trustees, who really pushed it, is now gone. That tells you everything you need to know. When a fucking rat like John Pryor decides that, you know, oh, this is what we're gonna do. You know, I know what's going on, man. This is who we need, blah, blah, blah. You know, we're gonna get him in here. You know, this is happening. And then all of a sudden, like a pussy, he gets up and leaves because he knows he fucked up. That tells you a lot about that guy's character. So if you're gonna make a huge mistake like Pryor did, you know, you gotta at least do like a Kyle Shanahan and like kind of throw yourself, you know, on the mercy of the court and say, oh yeah, it was my fault. I accept all blame for this. But he didn't. He tuck-tailed and run. What are you gonna do? Lastly, there's a lot of kerfuffle going on with Sophie Cunningham, the Indiana Fever, and their West Coast swing of games that are happening. And these two teenage girls that showed up with signs thanking Sophie for standing up for protecting girls' sports. Okay, I get that. But I also get we're living in a weird time. We're living in a click world, and we're also living in a world where there's a lot that is scripted. You know, and I think back, I feel like the whole world has been scripted in one way or another, but now a lot of us are understanding that the script is real, and we keep getting a peek behind the scenes and seeing the script. First of all, I agree that biological men should not play against biological women, or girls, boys, whatever. Totally get that. I understand, like, at certain ages, you know, if you need to fill teams, like, from, like, 6 to 9 or whatever, all right, you know, I can deal with that, but still, I think there needs to be, sports for boys and girls. And that's not to say that you hate trans people, which I don't think any of us are saying. I'm certainly not saying that. I'm saying that we established sports for men and for women, so women would not get hurt in playing those sports, and they could compete against each other, just as the men have competed against each other for thousands of years. But I do think what happened with the I can't remember the name of it, the co-owner or GM of the team that the Fever were playing spit on one of these girls. Dude, what are you thinking? First of all, these two girls sitting courtside, obviously somebody purchased those tickets for them. And then right next to them, you've got this, heavy set, butch looking lesbian with a sign, saying to protect, trans athletes. Okay. What are the odds of those three all sitting next to each other courtside? This is a setup. It's done because the optics are there, because people are choosing sides on this. And whoever did it, whoever paid for those seats, or whoever orchestrated all this, I have no issue with that, because this is something that needs to be sorted out, and it's a hot button issue for some reason, which I just don't get. And well, I kind of do get. You've got one side saying, oh, it's only a fraction of the population that's trans, and why would you care about this? And it's just, the reason why you care about this is because it only works one way. Yes, it is a small segment of the population, and the people who truly have gender dysphoria, I feel bad for. I can't imagine what kind of hell that you're living, but unfortunately, unfortunately, sports isn't the spot for you. And I'm totally fine if you want to have an open division for you to compete in, but even though that you feel like you were born in the wrong body, you still have the genetic makeup of a man. You cannot compete with women. It's just unfair. That's the bottom line to it. So having these girls with their shirts, those XXXY, Jennifer Say's company, it all just seems like too neat of a package for me. And then you have the butch lesbian sitting next to him. It was just like, oh, this is just too perfect. And being, having a background in entertainment, it's like you couldn't cast that any better. If I were casting a scene, that's exactly how I would cast it if I was trying to tell the story. And whoever put that together did a magnificent job. And again, it's, to me, the issue isn't who put them there. The bigger issue is, how do we go forward and sort this out? How do we get one half of the country, or it's not even that. I think it's more than that. I think it's like 80% of the population believes that males shouldn't compete against females. And I have no issues with that. And I don't think anybody, it's just anybody does. It's a small sliver of the population who will disagree with that. And that's fine to disagree. But what you're asking, and this is why a lot of us, at least for myself, partly, mainly it's a fairness issue for me, but it's also a speech issue. If you're going to force me to say that trans women are women, I'm not going to do it, because I know that's not the truth. I know what the truth is. You can't force me to say something that I know is not true, and I refuse to do it. And I feel like there's a lot of people like me who, hey, if you're trans, fine. I'll, in a work setting, a social setting, whatever, I'll go along with what you prefer. That's fine, because I have sympathy for you, and I'm also polite. But in that same situation, you can't force me to say that you're a woman. I can be polite to you and I can go along with it, but I cannot say something that I know is factually not true. And that's what a lot of people have issues with, is being forced into something that they know is factually not true. You go back to even COVID. Put on the mask. Why? Oh, because it stops, will stop the spread, droplets and, whatever else Fauci was saying. We know that's not true. It's like, if I fart, I can still smell the fart through my underpants. Do you really think that, that wearing a mask is going to block the virus from getting outside of it? No, it's not. Do I really think that wearing a mask into a restaurant and then taking off when I sit down is somehow beneficial. No, it's forcing people to do something that they wouldn't normally. It's forced compliance. That's all it is. And most people fell for it because they just wanted to go along to get along. And now we've come into a situation where the forced compliance is wearing off on a lot of people. It's wearing thin. And a lot of people, to the point who are the go along to get along types during COVID, have just had enough. And they're like, no, you rammed something down my throat with COVID that we knew that they had an inkling that wasn't true. Now it's proven. Now we know all the lies that happened with it, from the death rate, in Fauci's own words. He was saying it was 3%, but in his diary, he marked it down as 0.02%. That's a big difference. And in the people who refuse to believe that Fauci misled are the same ones who are now telling you you're a bigot if you don't say that trans women are women. And again, it goes back to, I don't want to be told that I have to say something that I know is a lie. I won't do it. And you can't make me do it. It's like, it's like that episode of Seinfeld when Kramer does the AIDS walk and refuses to wear the ribbon. I don't want to wear the ribbon. I'll go and support whatever, but you can't make me do something I don't want to do. All right. That does it for this week. And I will see you next week. Thanks for taking the time. And if you want to follow me, I'm on X at RunTheWorldTom. My Substack is Accidental Education. And I also appear Monday through Thursday on Balls and Banter with Drew Berquist. And that airs on Drew Berquist YouTube channel and also on Rumble. All right. We'll talk to you later. Bye.